everybody, it's Delilah Cordova, and I am here again with another awesome author interview. And as you all know, I am on my way to 100 interviews or author interviews. But if you are interested in having an interview with me, make sure you go to marketingandcoffee.com and submit an application. Today, I have with me Dewey Reynolds, and Dewey Reynolds is the author of Two Shades of Vice, which is based on the true story of an interracial couple and their life together in crime. In crime. This is going to be an awesome episode. If you guys are just now joining and you're watching the replay, make sure you hashtag replay. And, as always, share the content, support your authors. Dewey, how are you today?
I am doing great, Delilah. How are you?
I am awesome. I am so awesome. And I'm so happy that you're here. So,
thank you.
Would you like to tell them about you and your awesome book, and then we can discuss your awesome author life?
Yes, ma'am. Well, my name is Dewey B. Reynolds. I am an author, screenwriter, short filmmaker, and computer expert. I've been employed with the Internal Revenue Service for 22 years. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. And my hobbies include skating, cycling, traveling, reading, writing, discovering, and just doing about whatever keeps me on my feet and keeps me going and keeps my adrenaline rushing, because I am a very adventurous, outgoing person. And I am delighted to be on your show, Delilah, to talk about my book. And I would like to show it to your viewers. This is it. This is the front cover of it. It's entitled Two Shades of Vice, based on the true story of an interracial couple's life together in crime, which is about my interracial parents, who was a Caucasian male and a black female during the 1960s. Very exciting story.
You know what? I'm going to change it to side by side here. But I was looking at the images you had sent me. And
Yes.
when I was looking at it, I looked at the picture like about 2 or 3 times, and I was like, he looks just like one of each of them. And then I was like, maybe, and that was the first thought that came to my mind when I saw your author bio picture, and then I saw the cover, and I'm like, maybe those are his parents. Just maybe. Guess what?
Yes.
So you look like a little of both of them.
Yes, well, I've been told I look more like my father. Yeah, I've been letting my beard grow out because, matter of fact, I am going over to Egypt in October for 8 days.
For 8 days?
Yes, I'm going to pay pilgrimage to ancient Kemet.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me more about the story and the plot in the book, because now I'm interested in, like, this is a story based on your parents and their life in crime, and you're the product of the two. So this is really interesting. So can you tell us more about the story and the plot or what happened?
Well, Delilah, it's quite an amazing story, because the journey begins at the beginning of the 1960s here in Kansas City, Missouri. And my mother was out on the street soliciting, and she knew pretty much all facets of the prostitution game. And my father was a career criminal. His heritage is Irish. He's a Irish Caucasian man. And he was 26 years older than she was, and they both met out on the streets. And they felt as though they could make a lot of money together in a life of crime. So my father purchased a house that was like used as a body house, which include prostitution, drugs, bootleg whiskey, contraband cigarettes, gambling, you name it. They did it all. And he put my mother in charge of the girls, the women who worked for him, because he was a known procurer, which is a known pimp, of course. And he was pretty much knew all facets of crime. So he could make a lot of money with my mother. They could make a lot of money together. So they met up on the streets, and they came together to engage in a life of crime together. And when I did not know these things, because both of my parents abandoned me when I was 6 months old. But much later down the line, years later, I would start researching their background. And of course, when I went over to the Division of Family Services to learn about my stay in this foster home, I would learn that both of them were hardened criminals. And that took me over to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, in which I would get records on their criminal background and all the things that they were involved in. And I knew that I had quite an amazing story to kind of like dig into, if you will, to learn more about their criminal background, his criminal background and her criminal background. And I was given police reports, criminal rap sheets, which told me about every facet of crime that they were involved in. And I said, wow, this is truly an amazing story to know that this interracial couple, in which, because of anti-miscegenation laws, which outlawed interracial back then, but not only were they involved in a relationship, but they were also engaged in a serious life of crime. So they had a lot of strikes against them back then.
Wow. So okay.
Uh,
So you were put into the system because they were incapable of taking care of you, right?
Absolutely, because of their ongoing criminal lifestyle.
Right. And so you didn't, at what age did you find all this information out that your parents were hardened criminals, and um, how did you learn? What was that moment like that you learned all this?
I was blown away. I was stunned because I'm 53. God will soon to be 54 in October. But in my late 20s, I just wanted to just like really find out more about my background. I met my mother, and we pretty much had a good relationship before she died. She died in 1999. My father died in 1978. Like I said, he was 26 years older than she was, and I only met him one time, and that was a month before he died. But I wanted to find out more of where I came from, more about who I am, and where did I really come from. So I started doing a lot of research. I went over to the Division of Family Services, which records would talk about their criminal careers very briefly, which would lead me over to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, to the headquarters, which would give me more information about their life of crime and what they were doing. And it really went into detail through these police reports and through these criminal rap sheets about all like, for instance, like I said, like prostitution, drugs, uh, bootleg whiskey, strong arm robbery, burglary and larceny,
Wow.
assault and battery. I mean, these are the things my father was involved in. My mother was more so into the prostitution thing, which would eventually, he would acquire her services to pretty much be a madam in this body house, because he had like 5 or 6 girls working for him at one time. So she's the one that would greet the customers. She would collect the money. They go upstairs. They do what they do. They come downstairs. She try to get them to buy some whiskey, buy some cigarettes, do whatever to make more money. So they were hustlers. I mean, both of them were just hustlers to the core. And like I said, but I think one of the most interesting facets of this story that I wrote, Two Shades of Vice, is how these police reports and his criminal rap sheet would talk about how my father consorted with known gangsters, whether they were Irish, Italian, or Jewish. So he got around. He knew a lot of people. And matter of fact, he was a hijacker too. I mean, I come to find out he would hijack trucks carrying cigarettes and whiskey and beer and wine and frozen meats. I mean, like I said, this man was a criminal to the core. He was a career criminal. Never worked an honest day in his life. So this story is really a powerful story, and I'm very proud to tell it, because I believe that people that read it would get so much out of it.
Right. Well, they're the interracial Bonnie and Clyde of, their day.
Absolutely. Yeah, of their time. That's right. Of their time.
Wow. It's wow. I couldn't
That's what I'm
imagine.
saying. Wow. I could when I learned all these things, I couldn't stop saying wow. I mean, because I
Yeah.
have over 100 pages of police reports.
Wow.
1961, 1962, 1963, 1964, all the way up until I was born in October of 1964. I believe
Right.
they kind of decided to maybe leave that life of crime behind, get married, settle down, but that was long after I was put into foster care, and they decided, okay, well, we're getting too old. It's time to try something different. But I mean, you have to understand, Delilah, from reading my father's criminal rap sheet, this man did prison time in 5 different states.
Wow.
If that isn't moving around, I don't know what moving around is.
So did they ever settle down together?
Yeah, they got married. As a matter of fact, they eventually end up getting married.
Wow.
And
And
I'll say it again. I'll stress it again. He was 26 years older than her. He was born in 1905. She was born in 1931. He was almost 60 when I was born.
wow.
Of course, he had children from other relationships, and my mother had two other children from other who their surrogate father took care of them. So, yeah, it's kind of like the story jumps around a lot, but it all ties in together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome how, towards the end they actually were able to come together. So I think in your book there's some of that love story in there, right?
Oh yeah, there. I mean, it definitely became a love story. It became a story of like, okay, I'll give an example. There's an episode in the story where my mother goes to jail, and my father had been watching her. He knew she was on the streets. He had been watching her, and he felt like, oh, I think her and I can come together and do some things. And when he came to bail her out, the bail bondsman had asked him, well, you know you're bonding out a colored woman, don't you? So the bail bondsman was kind of like thrown aback because he was like wondering, why is this white man bailing out this black woman out of jail? I mean, what's the story behind it? And it kind of left him, I guess, like with some unanswered questions, like why is he doing this? Because this is unheard of. Why would I've never heard? I'm pretty sure he's probably looking at it as though um, all the years of being a bail bondsman, I've never seen a white man come and bail a black woman out of jail under
Right.
any circumstances. So yeah, and then it was like eventually the love would grow. I guess the longer they were around each other and involved in crime, they started coming together as lovers and will eventually fall in love and get married. So it's sort of a love story in a way.
Wow. So then the whole time, the whole time era of this is like, you want to say about 1930s to
No,
what
no, no, no. Actually, the beginning of the
what time frame?
1960s. Yeah, 1960s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because your mom was born in 19. Okay, so 1960s to 70s because your dad died at 70 something, right? I mean, on
He was 70.
1972.
He was 72 when he died.
Okay. So
Yes.
that's the time frame for this love story to play out, and this criminal criminal mastermind connection thing happens within the time frame. Okay, I just want to get
Yeah.
my time frame right because
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know,
Yeah. Let's
and then
go with
that.
let's go their criminal I guess you can say bond or their criminal them coming together lasted, I would say, from like maybe 1960 to 1965 for probably like a 5 year span
Okay,
where
cool.
they operated a body house, which like I said, which it included prostitution and drugs and liquor and cigarettes and gambling and all that.
So how did your father? How did he pass? Uh, like was it
He
like a
died.
gun smoke?
He died of a massive heart attack.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you figure a man who led the kind of lifestyle that he did pretty much was not into taking care of his health. I mean, he himself was a heavy drinker, a heavy smoker. He moved around, he jumped around, he was under so much stress, and he was under so much pressure until I believe that towards the end it all caught up with him.
More than likely, I would say. I would say that's a stressful life to be in, just
Very much so.
watching people in that situation on TV gets me under stress. So
Absolutely. And you have to understand, like you said, there were laws on the books back then that outlawed interracial, the anti-miscegenation laws, which was very effective in 17 states in America, and Missouri was one of the states. So they faced a lot of racial confrontation from police officers, from white supremacists, which is mentioned in the book. even from other black people who disapproved of interracial also. So they were against incredible odds back then, being an interracial couple, and I stress that in my book.
My question is, because I'm interracial too. My mom's black and my dad's white.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
in your time, in the time frame that, or when you, the era you grew up in, did
Uh,
you did you have it worse being an interracial child than
oh
or a
God,
black
yes,
kid?
yes. Because back then it wasn't funny, but I laugh about it now. I remember being in elementary school. I remember a couple incidents where the bell rung for school to let out. So I come on the playground. All these kids, all black kids, of course, all these kids gathered around there chanting, "White boy, white boy, white boy." So I was like this real bright skinned kid with the real curly, big giant curly locks and stuff. So I was interracial. They knew I was interracial. And probably one of the brightest kids as far as skin tone in the school. So they, the nickname was White Boy. So I'd come out on the playground when school would let out, and all these kids are chanting, "White boy, white boy." So, oh my God, I was tormented. I was taunted like you wouldn't believe. I mean, I would cry. I'd run up the street crying, being called that. And I'm pretty sure there were other interracial kids, around the country that probably went through the same thing. And being interracial and being so bright and you standing out from the other kids in the neighborhood, in the school, and such.
Right. See,
Mm.
growing up for me is like I couldn't fit in with white folks and I couldn't fit in with color folks, so I had to like find like
Yes.
my way in the middle
Yes,
of all
ma'am.
of that. And
Yes.
I had I couldn't relate to either side at all. And so you know what I did? I just went
What's
Hispanic.
that?
I
Well, you
just went
know
Hispanic.
when I first saw your picture, when I first requested an interview with you, I thought you were Hispanic. You looked at Puerto Rican or Dominican or Cuban, and that's what I thought you were. Because of the beautiful black hair, the nice olive skin, I would have swore you was Puerto Rican or Cuban or Dominican.
Fortunately. No, I'm mixed.
Yes.
My mama from Compton.
Wow. Compton, yeah, good old South Central.
So I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was
so
hard growing up interracial. I'll tell you that much.
it is hard. I can't.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering during
Because
that. But I
it's
think
almost
you had
like,
it worse because of the
huh?
time frame during the time that you grew up in.
Yes.
I
Oh
think you
yeah.
had it worse than what I
Yeah.
did.
I was born in because I was born in 1964, and you know, because interracial kids, which I can say that for myself, kind of went through, especially back then. It's probably a little lenient now. Not as bad because you got a lot of interracial going on nowadays. But interracial kids back then, when I was growing up, kind of went through an identity crisis because, like you said, where do I fit in? The whites won't fully accept me. The blacks won't fully accept me. So where do I fit in? And it's kind of like you're
Right.
stuck in the middle, trying to
Right.
find middle ground as to where do I really belong? A sense of
Right.
belonging.
Right. You
Yes.
don't know how true that
And
is.
then not only that, Delilah, you listen to interracial celebrities like Halle Berry, Lisa Bonet, Shamar Moore, and Jasmine Guy, and the list goes on about these celebrities who talk about how hard it was for them when they were growing up interracial.
Yeah.
Because I know Halle Berry in an interview said she got into a lot of fights because of her interracial background. Having a
Oh
white
yeah.
mother and a black father.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
My mom moved us out to the middle of Iowa when I was about 10, 11 years old, or no,
yeah,
a little older than that, because I was
yeah.
just starting high school. And
Uh-huh.
I used to get followed through the high school. My mom had opened up a pizzeria called Homeboy's Pizza or something like that.
Wow, what
And
a name.
I know, in the middle of this little Iowa white town. And I used to get followed around. They'd be like, "Oh, we're not eating your mom's pizza because it had curly pube hairs in it when my dad bought it last." And this and that. Like I was tormented that whole year I was in that school. I got into so
Oh,
many fights. I in Spanish class I had a through desk and people threw I got my ass whooped. It was just so crazy. So crazy how they were acting towards me. And I was like, I'm just like you. I don't know what the problem is, you know? I don't know
yeah.
no
Well, that
ghetto. I
yeah
don't
that
know.
that I do understand. We definitely can relate when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
both can share our stories and be able to relate about growing up and being,
growing up interracial.
ridiculed because of your background. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you go into a white school. I mean that was a white school. I went to a black school in Memphis, and I got my ass pounded over there too. like,
Wow.
like
So you couldn't win for losing, huh?
I couldn't. When I was growing up, I couldn't. Because the girls would hate on me because I had straight hair, and
Oh yeah.
I was living with
Yeah.
my mom's friends, and they were all black at the time, and so they knew I was mixed, and they couldn't get along with me. So
Yes,
it
ma'am.
is what it is, but it's a struggle being interracial in
Oh yes.
America. It's a
Uh-huh.
struggle.
But
So
I will tell you this much though. I believe no matter who you are and where you come from, you just have to like yourself. There's a such
right,
thing as self-love. So
right,
even though there's many people out there that will not accept you, if you love yourself, that's all that matters. You have to have self-love.
exactly,
Yes, you have to
exactly.
love yourself. So I've learned to love myself. I'm not in love with myself, but I love myself. So I
Right.
wouldn't care who wants to reject me or who will never accept me or whatever. It's just the fact, long as I like me, that's all that matters in the end.
For real. Amen to that.
Absolutely.
So, how did you get into writing in the first place?
Well, I've always saw myself as a very creative person. I've
Hmm.
always been someone that's imaginary, and whether it be real life stories or fantasy stories or fiction, I've always been a very avid reader too. I love to read and love to explore, very adventurous. So I always felt that writing was my forte. Something that I would want to pursue. And the beauty of writing, I tell you one of the beauties of writing is you never get too old for it. Some things in life you get too old for. You can't play basketball till you're 100. You can't play sports or you can't do certain things. You're eventually going to have to retire and leave it behind. But if you ask my opinion, you can write it until you're up on your deathbed, So that's what I love about the whole craft of writing, and it allows you, to have creative freedom and to express yourself. So it's something that I've always wanted to pursue, and writing this book allowed me to explore some things and to kind of like put my voice out there and just be able to tell a story that I believe that will be worthwhile of so many people's time.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely. And I think it's going to be popular with the times that it's coming into now because,
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
and the history behind it. I'm surprised nobody. Yeah, I hope this somebody picks this up because I think it's going to be an awesome movie.
You know what? I've said that. Delilah, I've said that repeatedly because it's. I say this very humbly. I never, beat my own drum, but I just feel as though that this story, I think so many people can relate to it. It's something that I believe can draw a lot of people in that have gone through it or are still going through it or knew someone that went through it or maybe have had parents or grandparents, even great grandparents that went through this interracial thing and the hardship, especially during that time period. And it would make a great film. It really would because it's one of those rare type of stories. I mean, okay, good example like the story about the loving couple up there in Virginia whose interracial union was outlawed and how they had to go leave Virginia, go to Washington D.C. to be married, and how when they got back, the sheriff or the police department there actually came in their house and arrested both of them for being an interracial couple. And I thought that was a very powerful story about the loving the interracial couple up there in Virginia, which they wrote a book about and made a film about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you imagine? Could you imagine living like that? That like, it's really. What about, like when back in the days when the old, like, you had the plantation owners and you
Yeah.
had the slaves, and they would shack up with the slaves. Wasn't there something against that, or no? Because wouldn't that be
Well,
considered,
well,
old
I'm
and
pretty sure
modern?
I'm pretty sure like you and I are two of a kind when it comes to this, but I'm a realist, first of all. I believe in telling it like it is. I'm a realist. I don't try to sugarcoat anything. But yeah, I've studied the history of slavery. I mean, of course, one of the best books written about slavery is Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., who was an editor for Ebony magazine. Um, but I've read books, I've seen movies, I've seen documentaries, and etc. So I'm well versed on it, like yourself. But of course, during slavery, there was a lot of raping and a lot of sexual, engagement between the white slave owners and the black slave women. And during the course of all this raping and all this sexual intercourse going on between the two, it produced a lot of mixed race mulatto children.
Hmm.
And then that's when you came up with the field slave and the house slave. And we know the field slave was usually the fair skinned, fine grade of hair, and then the field slave was the dark, kinky hair type of slave. So I sometimes ask the question, okay, you may have white people who may say, "Oh, I'm against interracial. I don't like interracial, and people need to stick with their own kind, and I'm sick of all this interracial and all these mixed race children running around." But here's the question I do have: having a white father and a black mother, the question that I would raise, the point I would raise would be simply, okay, if you are so against it, why did your ancestors, as well as mine too, do
Hmm.
all this raping of these black slave women during slavery and was producing all these mixed race mulatto children? If you're so against it, why? My question would be, Delilah, why are you so against it when they are the perpetrators of it? They're the ones who started it. So
Yeah.
if you're going to be angry or mad at someone, be mad at them. But also, like I said, I'm also talking about my ancestors as well as yours too, because
Hmm.
we're both interracial, so we have white ancestry. We're like first generation white, so
Right.
we definitely have a strong, history of white ancestry. But the bottom line is, I be telling them, don't be mad at when you see this black man walking down the street with this white woman, or you see this white man walking down the street with this black woman, or whatever the case may be, because of the fact it's something that predates all the way back to slavery. So with that said, you know, um, I'm not mad at either side. It took place, and like one a white he's passed on now, Andrew Hacker, who was a white historian, like he said, slavery was a mistake. And after slavery ended, they did not know what to do with the former slaves. So when slavery ended, the white man came to the realization, I made a mistake. Slavery was instituted, or was enunciated, if you will, to build wealth. That was the whole purpose of slavery, to build wealth. So
Right.
I'm not going to get too far into this. I don't want to get too far, veer off too far to the left or whatever. But I'm just saying though, you still have those whites, and even blacks too, that are against interracial. I don't like it. People should stick with their own kind. Whites should be with whites. Blacks should be with blacks. But it's something that was going on long before we showed up. Many, many, many years before we showed up, and I believe it's going to continue to go on.
Yeah. More likely. I think right now it's happened so much. We're just a big melting pot anyway. So
No question. No
we're
question.
getting there. We're getting there.
Yes, ma'am.
um. So you also work for the IRS as a day job. How do you balance that and your writing career? And I find it funny too is that your parents are both criminals and then you get a government job. Like, who would have seen that coming? But I bet your
Yeah.
mother was proud of you.
Yeah, you know, um, there are people that are still around that grew up with me that know me pretty well. They like, okay, I'm so proud of you because you could have went down the wrong path, either ended up jail or dead or on drugs or probably even a career criminal like your father was. But and of course, the foster home I grew up with wasn't the best place to live. It wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of unsanitary living conditions. But I don't know. I think I just chose to be a strong person. I just chose to be a survivor. And
Yeah.
I just decided a long time ago I'm gonna try to, if you will, take my life in the right direction. You know, I even before I found out about all these excuse me, found out about all these things that my father and mother were doing on record, I would hear stories about the lifestyle that they led. And but I just knew that I didn't want to go down the wrong path. And like I said, end up in jail or dead or strung out on drugs or anything. So therefore, um, yeah, like you said, you mentioned that I do work for the IRS, and how do I find time, to do that and do my writing? Well, I think life in general, Delilah, is about finding balance. We all have to find balance. You know, find time to do this, find time to do that. We try to find time. Like, you have a family, you have to find time for your family. You have to find time for your career. You have to find time to go off and have leisure time and maybe go out to a club and party a little bit, or travel to an exotic location and have a nice vacation. So I think life is all about finding balance, and that's what I try to do, like anyone else. Like, try to find balance, work my job, uh, do my writing, do my reading, go out and ride my bicycle and cycle a little bit. So, like I said, in the end, it's all about trying to find balance.
Yeah, it is. It is. Um, so Two Shades of Vice is quite an undertaking since it's grounded in real history. How would you describe your process for writing it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it took me a while to get all my research material, because even though this story is about my real life mother and father, which I kind of feel as it falls upon a true crime. Well, there's some embellishment there, of course, but the first step was to, like, get all my research material, like all these police reports, which spans over like a 5 or 6 year period, to get my mother and father's criminal rap sheet, to listen to some eyewitness accounts of people that knew my mother and father from out on the streets, who are older people. Of course, most of them are passed on now. May God rest their soul. So once I figured I had gathered all my research material, and from just even stories that my mother would tell me herself that they were doing long before she died, I felt as though I was armed with enough material to come up with a full length book that could really tell a complete story and go into detail and try to pay more attention to, like, I guess what you would call historical accuracy as far as their story is concerned, and just comprise all this material and bring it together and come up with a book, as I said, would tell a complete story. But it was a journey. It was almost like a spiritual journey for me too.
Right, right. I would see that. I could see that. So
Mhm.
how is that different than the way you've approached your other novels?
Well, this story is, I would say, is more closer to my heart. Um, I will mention this though. I laugh. I love gangster stories. I love mafia stories. Love mob stories to the max. I wrote a book called Network of Killers, which takes place here in Kansas City, because there was a point in time in the very city I was born and raised in, which is Kansas City, was a big gangster town. I mean, you talking mobsters from Chicago, from New York, from Cleveland, Milwaukee, New Orleans, from Florida. They all would come to Kansas City to have parties, to kind of like discuss their business and everything. And I've researched a lot of stuff about the mob here in Kansas City. So actually, I feel as though I can tell a story about my mom and dad. I can tell a mob story. I can tell a mystery story. And because as a famous writer and I guess you could say like a historian or whatever, like he once said, there's a wealth of great stories right there where you live. That's anybody, no matter where you live in the United States, whether it be in Montana or North Dakota or Chicago or Los Angeles, there are great untold stories right there where you live. And I look at it the same way here in Kansas City. There's a lot of stories that have taken place in this city over the years that are untold. So I believe there's a lot of untapped stories that are yet to be told right here in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, most definitely. We
Hmm.
have America has such a crazy history, you know.
Oh, it
Every town,
does.
every yeah, has had amazing people born and raised, and you know,
Hmm.
ongoings and laws and things changing. And so, what would you like readers to take away from Two Shades of Vice?
Well, I would like for them to be able to, per se, learn how you can overcome the odds. And if you love someone, you shouldn't let you all's race come between you all. You shouldn't let other people tell you how you should live your life, how you can overcome incredible odds, and how you basically can become whatever you want to become. Not to be saying that you should, engage in a life of crime the way my mom and dad did, but just be able to understand that if you are a strong person, you can overcome a lot of odds in your life. And I want people to be able to say, okay, well, I can relate to this in that book or that in that book. It's something in that book that I can relate to, whether it happened to me or whether it happened to a relative or a friend or maybe some of my ancestors from maybe 2 or 3 or 4 generations ago. Just be able to say there was something in that book that I can certainly relate to.
Right, right, nice. All right. So my next question is, you
Mhm.
give such good detailed answers.
I try
um,
to.
what advice would you give to writers who are just getting into their journey of writing?
I would say the most important thing is to find your own voice and to always, and I do stress this a lot, and I'm pretty sure anybody who's then sold 500 million books, or whether they sold only one book, always stay true to yourself. And I believe that anyone in any art form, whether it be music, literature, acting, dancing, painting, no matter what you choose to do, you always have to find your own voice and you have to stay true to yourself. Because, I mean, I was just reading an article about a famous author who said that don't try to write what is selling. Like, for instance, let's say if right now, thrillers and mystery are like the hot genres that are selling right now. So someone say, "Oh, well, I'm going to write a thriller. I'm going to write a mystery because those are the kind of genres that are selling right now." That's a trap that a lot of up and coming writers fall into. Write what's inside of you. Write what you're feeling, and stay true to yourself. Because when you write, as with singing and dancing and acting, if you're doing something that you're not comfortable doing, the audience can pick that up. So if you write something that you know that did not come from deep within you, your readers are going to pick that up. So I would say to anybody, any writer that wants to be a writer, always stay true to yourself.
Right, right. Because you only can do what you feel inside to do. You know.
Absolutely.
When you know, for me, you know, as a marketer, when I try to go outside and do things I'm not comfortable or not knowledgeable, you know, it doesn't always work out the best because I need to stick with what I know, you know? Um,
Absolutely.
true to what I feel.
That's right. And I would encourage you to always be that way. Never change. Just be who you are.
Right, right. So is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
Well, I would like to show the front cover of my book, the paperback edition. This is Two Shades of Vice, based on the true story of an interracial couple's life together in crime, which takes place exclusively in Kansas City during the 1960s. It's very much based on a true story about my parents, my mom and my dad. Of course, this right here is a photo that's inside the book. It's a police lineup photo of them upon one of their many arrests.
Oh
Of course,
wow.
this is a police mugshot of my father upon one of his many arrests. This is a police mugshot of my mom upon one of her many arrests. And it's a very good book, and it's available right now at my website at www.deweyreynoldsbooks.com. Again, that's www.deweyreynoldsbooks.com, or you can go to Amazon, and it's available there. And I would encourage anyone who wants to read some very, very lively, I mean, adrenaline pumping literature, is definitely in my book. It's never a boring moment. You'll be entertained and you'll be enlightened from cover to cover.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Dewey, it is so awesome that I was able to get you on my show. And
Well,
I
I'm
think we had a
honored. I'm
great,
very honored to be a guest on your show. I really am.
yes. And this was such an awesome interview. I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And it was nice to connect with somebody that is also an interracial baby like me.
Well, thank you. There's a lot, and that's another thing about my book. You asked the question, what would people take away from? Okay, I think, like, let's say you do have people, and I'm pretty sure there's more than enough individuals, male, female, young, middle age, old, who are interracial, who may have gone through some things in their life. They would relate if they come from an interracial background. Or let's say you have an interracial couple, be they black and white, be they black and Mexican, be they white and Mexican, white Oriental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They most definitely can gain something from reading this book about dealing with the hardships, or dealing with, a lot of things that come with being involved in interracial. Things are better now. We've come a way. I still think we got a ways to go, but
Right.
compared to, like I said, during that time period in the early 1960s, when America itself was going through a lot of social unrest, and there was a lot of the Jim Crow laws were still in effect, and desegregation and et cetera. I mean, segregation per se. You know, they caught hell, and that's talked about in the book, the true hell that they did catch. So there's so much to offer in the story. There really is.
Well, to be honest with you, I think that the changes that that I grew up with, that they really didn't, things didn't really start to change for interracial children until about 15 years ago. And
You're
that's
right.
when it finally became acceptable to be interracial. And people don't seem to realize that it was not that long ago that we were still being, segregated from black and white and all this and that. You know what I mean? We didn't really come together until about 15 years ago.
And you know what? I gotta mention this. I gotta mention this before we go. There's one individual in the entertainment world that I admire greatly, and this guy, he doesn't care. He loves him some black women, and that is Robert De Niro. And he's been married 3 times to 3 different black women. He has some beautiful interracial children, and I think someone like him, if you was to sit down and talk to Robert De Niro, it seems like he'll tell you, I love black women. I always have liked black women. I'm going to forever like black women. And if people don't like it, then that's just too bad. And And you know, there are people that are like that, that are involved in interracial. Like, I like this person, that person likes me. We're going to be together. I don't care how much opposition we come up against. We're going to be together. And if you don't like it, then hey, that's just too bad.
Right, right. And that's just how it is. Now it's like that these days. So, you know, it's getting better and better for us.
It's about time. It's about time. It really is.
It is. It was a long time in the making though, because
Yes, it was.
like you know, the turmoil of America's racism, like, or the fighting against black and white, has spanned
Yes,
over a couple, you know, 150 years, whatever, right?
yes, yes.
I want to say about 150 because, you know, yeah. But anyway, I'm not a history buff, so I don't know the actual years. But it's just the last 15 years is when it actually just started to turn around, and there still has a
Yes.
little bit more to go. And you know, I'm looking forward to the future for interracial kids and people
Oh,
like you.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's still what you call. I'm gonna put it in these terms. There's still what you call dissension among the ranks, and there's
Hmm.
still somewhat of power struggle. But like I said, I believe people are waking up more. I mean, I do believe you
Hmm.
still got that group that are still sleeping and they're not conscious. But I believe as time go on, more and more people are waking up and they realize that, you know, I have no reason to walk around with this hatred in me for someone who has absolutely done nothing to me. So
Right.
we can only hope and pray that things will continue to improve, which I believe it will. I do believe.
It,
I'm very optimistic that it will improve.
right. The lines are so blurred. It's not even going to be a line anymore. So eventually.
You're right. You're right. By the grace of God. Yes.
All right. So with that being said, Dewey, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks to all
Well, I
my
thank you for
viewers.
having me as a guest. I appreciate it greatly, and I've had a wonderful time talking with you. I really did.
Yeah, me too. This is an awesome conversation. But thanks to my viewers, if you're now just catching the live, make sure you hashtag replay. And as always, make sure that if you have a stack of books sitting in your house that you enjoyed those books, go ahead and jump on Amazon and leave a review for the authors. The best compliment you can give an author is a review. So, with that being
Absolutely.
said, everybody have a great evening. And until next time, bye guys.
Bye, everyone. God bless.
One moment.